When you project your insecurities onto her, you're not just damaging the relationship, you're interfering with the natural laws that govern your personal growth. You see, everything in life is a reflection. The outer world is a mirror of your inner world. And the way you treat her often reveals more about what's going on inside you than what's happening outside. If you're carrying limiting beliefs, unresolved trauma, or deep-rooted doubts about your own value, and you haven't become conscious of them, they will show up in how you relate to her. You might become possessive, jealous, overly critical, or emotionally distant, not because of anything she did, but because you're projecting your own emotional noise onto her. And the most dangerous part of this is that you probably won't even realize you're doing it. It's automatic. A subconscious pattern, a paradigm, quietly running the show while you think you're making rational decisions. In relationships, especially with someone who reflects love, warmth, and intuition, your insecurities have nowhere to hide. She will feel them, not necessarily because you voice them outright, but because your energy shifts. You stop celebrating her wins. You get triggered when she shines. You become suspicious when she's too happy without you. Why? Because deep down, you haven't yet accepted the idea that you're worthy of love that doesn't need to be earned through control or performance. And so, to protect your fragile image of self, you start trying to contain her. You criticize, you minimize, you pull her down subtly so she stays within your comfort zone. But what you're really doing is trying to mold her into a version that makes you feel secure, not a version that reflects her truth. This all goes back to programming. From a young age, we're conditioned to believe we have to prove our worth, that we're not enough as we are. Those beliefs settle deep in the subconscious and form a paradigm, a mental program that controls our habitual behavior. If you haven't reprogrammed that paradigm, it will interpret every moment of her independence, beauty, or confidence as a threat, not a blessing. So now you're not responding to her. You're reacting to an internal fear you haven't faced yet. The moment you feel in fear, instead of elevating yourself through awareness and growth, you try to pull her down so you can feel taller. But truth doesn't work like that. Energy doesn't lie. If you make her carry the burden of your unhealed wounds, she will begin to carry the emotional weight of your growth for you. And over time, she'll feel drained, unappreciated, and unseen. Not because you don't love her, because you haven't done the inner work to love yourself fully yet. You were not designed to live in limitation. You were not born to carry insecurity as a permanent identity. But if you refuse to confront it, your insecurity becomes a lens through which you view everything. Her love, her ambition, her freedom. Instead of celebrating her brilliance, you resent it. Instead of trusting her intuition, you question it. You rate it to things that aren't there. Assume the worst, overanalyze, control, and cling. All because you're afraid that if she grows too much, she'll outgrow you. But the truth is, if you expanded your awareness, elevated your paradigm, and did the internal work to heal and evolve, you would match her energy instead of fearing it. She is not your therapist. She is not your fixer. She is not your emotional punching bag. When you use her as a place to dump your insecurity instead of using your time alone to transmute it, you're not loving her. You're using her. And love is not meant to carry the weight of your unhealed identity. It's meant to be the field in which both people expand, individually and together. But expansion requires awareness. And awareness begins with honesty. You have to ask yourself, am I showing up in this relationship with open energy? Or am I operating from fear and scarcity? Am I seeing her clearly? Or am I seeing her through the distortion of my wounds? A man who's rooted in truth of power does not shrink in the presence of a powerful woman. He does not sabotage her light to dim the glare on his own darkness. He rises, he works, he rewires, and then he loves fully, without fear, without projection, without conditions. Because he's realized that the only way to truly be with her is to take full responsibility for his inner world. Until then, every look she gives, every boundary she sets, every moment she takes for herself, every success she earns, it'll all be misinterpreted through the old program. And instead of experiencing her love, he'll experience the chaos of his own unresolved narrative. The projection continues and the cycle repeats until one day he wakes up and realizes it was never about her. It was always about the story he was telling himself when he looked in the mirror. When you make her responsible for your happiness, you're stepping outside the laws that govern personal power. Happiness is not something that can be transferred from one person to another like a gift. It doesn't come wrapped in attention, affection, or approval. It is generated from within. It's a state of awareness, not a condition dictated by external events or the behavior of someone else. And yet, so many people enter relationships carrying a silent contract, make me feel good, make me feel worthy, make me feel whole. But nobody signs that agreement. She's not there to rescue you from your emotional storms. She's not a filler for the void inside you. If you enter a relationship with emptiness, you will expect her to fill it. But she can't. Not permanently. Not sustainably. And every time she fails to meet that unspoken expectation, you'll feel let down, not because she did something wrong, but because you outsourced the responsibility of your emotional well-being. That is one of the most dangerous positions you can put her in. Because when your emotional balance depends on how she shows up, how she texts, how she reacts, how she loves you on any given day, you lose all sense of internal stability. You start riding the wave of her mood, her energy, her attention, and eventually you'll start resenting her for not keeping you. The truth is, she was never meant to do that. She's meant to walk with you, not carry you. The moment you make her your emotional crutch, you limit both of your growth. You tie her down with your unmet needs and then label her inconsistent or distant when she tries to breathe. That's not love. That's possession in disguise. That's dependence master's devotion. There's a fundamental law in the universe The law of vibration, everything you attract, everything you experience is in harmony with your frequency. If your frequency is lack, you will attract and experience more lack, even if you're in a relationship. If your vibration is rooted in insecurity, your mind will filter everything she does through that lens. You'll take her need for space as rejection, her silence as punishment, her boundaries as abandonment, not because any of that is true, but because your inner state is distorted. And so long as your happiness depends on her actions, you are never free. You're emotionally tethered to her validation. And she can sense that. She may not articulate it, but she will feel in your energy that silent pressure, that invisible weight. And over time, she begin to pull away. Not because she doesn't care, because she knows she was never meant to be the source of your peace. You must become the source. That's the work. That's the responsibility no one can create for you. No one can shift your paradigm but you. And the truth is, if you're not whole alone, you won't be whole with someone either. Because a relationship doesn't erase what's broken. It magnifies it. She's not here to complete you. That's a myth that's kept people trapped in cycles of pain and disappointment for generations. Completion is an inside job. You come into the relationship as a whole being, she does the same, and together you create something powerful, not because you need each other, but because you choose each other. Needing someone to be okay is not love. It's a survival mechanism. It's a byproduct of a paradigm that says you're not enough on your own, that you're not worthy unless you're wanted, that your joy depends on whether she sees you, texts you, praises you. That's not just unhealthy, it's unsustainable. It leads to control, to guilt, to manipulation disguised as affection. You start saying things like, you don't care about me anymore, when really you're just saying, I don't know how to feel secure without your constant attention. And that's not a problem to fix. That's yours. When you truly understand the power of your own mind, when you realize that your thoughts, your emotions, and your state of being all within your control, you begin to shift. You begin to take ownership. You stop waiting for her to validate your existence. You stop assigning her the impossible task of keeping you fulfilled. You begin to generate happiness internally through purpose, gratitude, vision, and alignment with your higher self. That's when the relationship begins to breathe. That's when love becomes real, because now it's not coming from desperation. It's not a plea wholeness. It's an overflow. And when two people come together for an overflow, they don't drain each other. They expand. But when you approach her from a place of emotional debt, you turn the relationship into a transaction. You give only to get. You say the right things not because they're true, because you want a specific reaction. And when she doesn't respond the way you expect, you feel cheated. That's not intimacy. That's control wearing a smile. And the root of that control is simple. You've forgotten your own power. You've forgotten that the same source that breathes life into her is the source that breathes life into you. You've disconnected from it and made her your connection point. But she's not your God. She's not your anchor. She's not your reason for waking up and believing in yourself. That work is yours. That path is yours. That freedom, the kind that doesn't waver when she's busy, tired, or unavailable, that's only found when you stop assigning her the job of fixing a hole in your soul she never created in the first place. When you compete with her growth, you step out of alignment with the natural laws of abundance and into the illusion of scarcity. You start operating from fear instead of faith, from ego instead of awareness. And that's not just unhealthy for the relationship. It's destructive to your own potential. The truth is, you were never meant to compete with her. You were meant to rise together. You were meant to evolve alongside each other, feeding off each other's strength, wisdom, and light. But when the paradigm you've inherited teaches you that success is limited, that attention is a zero, some game, that only one person can shine at a time, you'll find yourself trying to dim her light to make yours appear brighter. That's not power. That's insecurity masquerading as masculinity. When you see her doing the inner work, growing, reading, reflecting, healing, building her identity, expressing her gifts, and something inside you tightens instead of expands, that's a sign. That's your subconscious reacting to a perceived threat. But the threat isn't her growth. It's your stagnation. It's the part of you that knows you've been avoiding your own evolution. And instead of facing that discomfort head on, it's easier to criticize, mock, or minimize her progress. You start making side comments. You get sarcastic. You withdraw your support. You act like her new mindset is too much or that she's changing too fast, when in reality, she's simply reflecting back to you the growth you've been resisting in yourself. See, people don't fear change. They fear the discomfort that comes with being left behind. And when she's elevated and you're still repeating the same patterns, the gap gets wider. You start to feel out of sync. And instead of asking yourself, how can I grow too? You unconsciously try to pull her back down into your level of comfort. But that's not love. That's control driven by fear. That's resistance to truth. Because real love doesn't shrink when someone evolves. It stretches. It expands to match the new version of the person you're with. There's a universal law that governs all growth, the law of cause and effect. Her growth is not a random accident. It's a result of new causes, new thoughts, new decisions, new environment. If you're not willing to shift your own causes, you won't produce new results. So you'll keep circling the same habits, feeling threatened every time she levels up because you're not moving with her. And yet, she's not growing to leave you. She's growing to become more of herself. And if you can't meet her there, if your pride won't let you learn from her, if your ego tells you her evolution is a threat instead of a treasure, then what you have isn't partnership. It's possession. You're holding on to a version of her that no longer exists and trying to box her into it just to soothe your own sense of control. Let's be clear, when a woman grows, that is not your cue to compete. It's your opportunity to rise. It's your invitation to look within and ask, What in me is afraid of her becoming more? What am I not doing that makes her growth feel like an attack instead of an inspiration? Because when you compete with her, you drain energy. But when you align with her, you multiply it. Two people on a path of growth can accelerate far more together than they ever could alone, but only if both are willing to evolve. You have to be honest with yourself. Are you supporting her out loud while secretly resenting her in silence? Are you cheering for her wins publicly but minimizing their importance privately? Are you telling yourself you're fine while she's out there stretching her comfort zone, building her mindset, reading, healing, and investing in her purpose? Because if you're not doing the same, you're falling behind, not just in the relationship, but in your own journey. And deep down, you know it. There's nothing more dangerous to a man's potential than standing next to a woman who's growing while he stays still. Not because of her, but because of what that mirror reflects. And that reflection will either push you to evolve or trigger you to retreat. If you retreat, you'll sabotage. You'll criticize her ambition. You'll question her loyalty. You'll start arguments out of nowhere. You'll label her too busy, too focused, too different, anything to justify your own fear of stepping into more. But if you evolve, if you lean into your discomfort and turn it into action, if you match her frequency instead of resenting it, then you become the kind of partner who doesn't just witness a becoming. You become alongside her. You were never meant to remain the same. Life is always inviting into a higher version of yourself. And often, that invitation comes through the example of someone close to you. So if she's waking up earlier, meditating, building her business, expanding her knowledge, working on her body, writing her vision, that's not a challenge to your identity. It's a reminder of what you're capable of. The same intelligence that's moving through is available to you, but you have to choose it. You have to claim it. You have to step into it. Because if you spend your energy trying to slow her down instead of speeding yourself up, you won't just lose her momentum. You'll lose connection with your own. And that's a loss far greater than any relationship. That's a forfeiting of purpose. That's shrinking your soul just to protect your comfort. And comfort never created greatness. Comfort never built a powerful relationship. Comfort never helped two people evolve into the best version of themselves. Only growth can do that. Only awareness. Only the willingness to rise instead of resent. When you diminish her voice, you're not just silencing her words. You're stifling her spirit. You're muting her essence, her truth, her ability to stand in her power. And that doesn't just affect her, it affects you too. Because when you suppress her, you shrink the relationship. You choke the energy, you lower the vibration to the universal law at play here. The law of expression. Everything that has life must express itself to thrive. And when a woman speaks her truth, whether it's soft or sharp, emotional, grounded, celebratory, or confrontational, she is moving energy, she is staying aligned, she is healing. But if you interrupt her, dismiss her, ignore her, or constantly correct her, you're telling her that her truth is only valid when it aligns with your comfort. And that's not love. That's control with a smile on its face. Most men don't even realize they're doing this. It doesn't always look like shouting her down or blatantly shutting her up. Sometimes it's subtle. It's the eye rolls, the smirks. You're overthinking again. It's the quick subject changes when the conversation gets uncomfortable. It's cutting her off mid-sentence to inject your logic before she finishes her emotion. It's walking out of the room when she's finally gathering the courage to speak about something that matters to her. And every single time you do that, you are rewiring her nervous system to associate expressing herself with being unseen, unheard, or invalidated. And eventually, she stops talking. She goes quiet. Not because she has nothing to say, but because she's learned that saying it doesn't make a difference. That's not a win. That's not peace. That's the sound of her retreating inward, burying her voice to keep the relationship from falling apart. And while you may feel momentary control, what you've actually lost is connection. Her silence isn't peace. It's protection. She's not speaking less because she trusts more. She's speaking less because she's tired of explaining who she is to someone who keeps editing her every time she shows up as herself. You didn't fall in love with her to mute her. You didn't choose her so she could turn into a watered down version of herself just to preserve your ego. You chose her because she had something powerful, a voice, a presence, a perspective. Don't strip that away just because it challenges you or forces you to expand. See, when a woman speaks, she's not always asking you to fix something. She's not always attacking. She's not always complaining. She's expressing. That's how she clears emotional residue. That's how she processes. That's how she builds intimacy, by revealing what's real. And if your default response is to shut that down, you're blocking the very doorway to emotional depth. You think she's too emotional, but what you're really seeing is someone brave enough to feel in a world that teaches us to numb. You think she's too sensitive, but she's actually just deeply aware. And instead of listening with presence, you listen with defense. You prepare your counter argument while she's still speaking. You hear her tone instead of her truth. And that's why the relationship never deepens, because you're not meeting her where she's at. You're dragging her back to where you're comfortable. It takes strength to listen. It takes maturity to hold space for a voice that doesn't match your own. It takes wisdom to say, I don't fully understand, but I'm here to learn. And when you offer her that, when you stop reacting and receiving, everything changes. She opens up more. She softens. She trusts. Not because you solved her problems, but because you honored her expression. You showed her that her voice mattered, even when it's messy, even when it's loud, even when it makes you uncomfortable. That's when she starts to feel safe. And when a woman feels safe, she becomes her full self. Her creative power awakens. Her love deepens. Her sensuality flourishes. Her light shines brighter, not because you gave it credit, but because you allowed it. You made room for her to be all of her without judgment or interruption. But when you don't, when you keep cutting her off, brushing her off, or acting like her voice is an inconvenience. You train her to withhold. You train her to doubt herself. You teach her that love only exists when she's agreeable. And she might stay. She might still love you. She might still show up. But you'll never truly have her. Not in the way that makes a relationship transformative. You'll have a filtered version. A version that's always checking, always shrinking, always editing before speaking. Not out of respect, but out of fear. Fear of being shut down. Fear of being dismissed. Fear of being too much. And over time, that fear turns into distance. Emotional distance. Energetic disconnect. And you'll wonder why the passion faded, why the connection feels shallow, why she's changed. She didn't change. She adapted to the environment you created, one where her voice didn't have room to live. You have to ask yourself, what am I so afraid of in her truth? Why do I need to dominate the conversation? What part of me feels threatened when she speaks with emotion, intensity, or clarity? Is it that I don't trust her insight? Or is it that I don't trust myself to receive it without crumbling? Because the truth is, when a man is anchored in his own identity, a woman's voice doesn't scare him, it inspires him, it teaches him, it sharpens him, it opens him. But when he's rooted in ego, in false power, in the illusion of needing to be right, to feel worthy, her voice becomes a challenge to his sense of self. And that's when he starts silencing her, not because she's wrong, but because her truth shines light on where he's still asleep. When you're physically present but spiritually absent, you're offering her a shell, not a soul. You're there in body, but your mind is somewhere else, locked in distraction, buried and numbed out by routine. And a woman can sense that. She feels it in your silence. She feels it in your short responses, your blank stares, your heavy sighs that speak louder than words ever could. Presence is not just about showing up. It's about how you show up. It's about the energy you bring into the room, the level of attention you offer, the space you create through your stillness, your awareness, your eye contact, your willingness to be with her, not just sit beside her. She doesn't need your body in the same space. If your soul is 1,000 miles away, you might think you're doing enough. You come home. You pay the bills. You eat dinner at the same table. You watch the same TV shows. But presence is more than shared time. It's shared connection. It's the way you respond when she speaks. It's whether or not you see her when she walks into the room. It's the tone in your voice when she opens up her heart. She's not asking for your full attention every second of the day, but she's silently begging for your presence in the moments that matter. Those moments where she's vulnerable, where she's showing her fatigue, where she's smiling just a little less, where her voice shakes, where her energy feels low. Those are the moments that test whether you're with her emotionally, mentally, spiritually, or if you're just performing the duties of a partner while your essence is disengaged. And here's the trick: she notices everything. The way your eyes drift to your phone when she's talking, the way your responses get shorter and more robotic, the way you nod without hearing a word she said. She may not always call it out, but she registers it. And every time she feels that disconnection, she questions her importance in your life. Not because she's insecure, but because connection is oxygen to the feminine heart. She doesn't want a roommate. She wants resonance, alignment. She wants to feel your energy wrap around her when you enter the room, not just your shadow, but when you stay spiritually checked out. You're telling her without saying a word, you're not worth my full attention. Now, here's what you might not realize. Your absence doesn't just affect her. It disconnects you from your own potential. Because the same lack of presence that keeps you disengaged in your relationship is the same energy that keeps you stuck in life. If you're floating through the day without conscious awareness, if you're half listening, half trying, half living, you're never accessing your full power. The power that comes from being rooted in the moment, from tuning in, from listening not just with your ears, but with your soul. When you practice true presence, you tap into a deeper level of awareness, one that allows you to feel what's unspoken, to catch the signals between the words, to be moved by what most people miss. That's where the magic lies. Not in grand gestures, but in quiet attention. But let's be honest, presence is uncomfortable when you're not used to it. It exposes you. It forces you to feel. It pulls you out of autopilot and into the now. And for many men, the now is filled with unprocessed emotions, pressures, fears, and unresolved inner noise. So instead of facing that, you bury yourself in distractions. You stay busy. You stay tired. You use work, social media, your phone, your hobbies, even your silence as a wall. Not because you don't care, but because you haven't learned how to be with your own emotions. So being fully present with hers feels overwhelming. But here's the truth. Presence doesn't require perfection. It doesn't mean you have to have all the answers or be emotionally flawless. It just means you're there, open, receptive, willing. It means you're not running from the moment. You're choosing to live in it, with her, beside her, within yourself. She's not asking to be a superhero. She's asking you to see her, to feel her, to share the weight of the invisible things she carries every day. And when you meet her with stillness instead of distraction, with attention instead of assumption, she feels it. Her guard comes down. Her love flows more freely. Her heart becomes more generous. Not because you bought her something, not because you said the perfect words, but because you gave her what the world rarely gives: presence without performance, love without conditions, energy without expectation. What you don't realize is that your presence has the power to ground her, to stabilize her energy when the world feels like chaos. But you can't offer that if you're still floating, still disconnected, still hiding behind avoidance and numbed out silence. And presence doesn't require more time, requires more intention. A 2-minute conversation with full presence is more in it than an hour of passive distraction. A single look, a single moment of focused energy can repair more emotional distance than days of coexisting in the same space. And when you make presence a habit, when she no longer has to beg for it, when it becomes your default instead of your exception, the relationship shifts, the bond deepens, The trust rebuilds, and you as a man step into a different level of power. Not controlling power, not loud power, still power. The kind that calms storms with presence alone. The kind that makes a woman feel safe, seen, and celebrated not because you told her, but because your energy said it louder than words ever could. When you use love as a transaction, you strip it of its purity and turn it into a form of emotional currency, something to be exchanged, bargained with, measured, and held hostage. And real love doesn't work like that. Real love isn't a negotiation table where you give affection to get validation, where you perform just enough care to receive intimacy, where every action is driven by the expectation of a return. That's not connection. That's manipulation dressed in the clothes of affection. It's easy to say, I love you, but if what follows is, as long as you make me feel a certain way, or as long as you meet my conditions, that's not love. That's a contract written by fear, not by the heart. Transactional love is rooted in scarcity. It believes there's enough to go around, not enough attention, not enough value, not enough emotional energy. So you start measuring, you keep score. But you didn't do that. I gave more than you owe me. It becomes a silent battle of who's doing more, who's trying harder, who's more invested. And slowly, silently, that scorekeeping starts to poison the bond. Instead of loving her because it feels true, you love her when it feels earned. You give when it benefits you. You listen when you know it'll get you something in return. And she feels that. Maybe not in words, but in your energy. She senses the difference between love that's flowing freely and love that's being withheld as leverage. Love is not a vending machine where you put in kind words and expect immediate emotional output. It's not about giving so you can later say, look what I did for you. If your acts of love come with invisible strings attached, she'll eventually stop trusting them. She'll start wondering if your compliments are genuine or just a setup. If your touch is sincere or just a strategy. If your effort is real or if it's a debt collector waiting for its due. And that's when the relationship stops being a sanctuary and starts feeling like a trap. There's a universal law, the law of circulation. Everything that flows naturally in the universe does so without demand. The sun gives light without expecting thanks. The ocean gives rhythm without waiting for applause. The tree offers shade without asking for a reward. And yet in love, we often give with clenched fists, waiting for something in return. That's not divine. That's ego. That's fear. That's the part of you that still believes love is something you have to earn by controlling the other person's behavior instead of cultivating your own internal peace. When love becomes a transaction, you stop being present. You're no longer in the moment with her. You're in the past, recalling what you gave, or in the future, worrying about what you'll get back. You start monitoring. You analyze every move she makes, calculating whether it matches your efforts. You withhold affection when you feel she hasn't earned it today. You pull back emotionally when she doesn't react how you expected. That kind of energy slowly kills authenticity. Because now she's no longer responding to your real self. She's performing under pressure, trying to meet your invisible expectations. And eventually she gets tired. Not just physically, but emotionally. Tired of trying to be enough for someone whose love is always on a timer, always conditional, always 1 foot in, 1 foot out, depending on what she provides. What many people don't realize is that love isn't something you get. It's something you become. You don't fall in love, then hold a hostage until your needs are met. You be loved, you give love, you radiate love because that's who you've chosen to be. And when two people do that without agenda, without scorekeeping, without withholding, something powerful happens. Love begins to flow. It stops being something you fight for and becomes something you live in. And ironically, when love is given freely and multiplies, it comes back to you in ways that no transaction ever could. But it doesn't come back on demand. It comes back through alignment, through resonance with the energy you consistently offer. But when you make love a tool to get something, to control her mood, to manipulate her actions, to ensure she never leaves, you reduce its frequency. You pull it down from the level of spirit and drag it into the world of ego. And ego always wants control. It always wants return on investment. It always wants to protect itself. But love doesn't need protection. It needs expression. And sometimes love won't look like convenience. It won't look like perfect timing. It won't be symmetrical or predictable. But that doesn't make it any less real. In fact, love that shows up without being requestful, love that flows without condition, love that gives without keeping a record. That's the most real form of love there is. You don't show love to prove something. You don't give love to get something. You give because it reflects who you are at your core. Because it's your nature. Because you know that withholding love as punishment or giving it only as reward makes the entire relationship a business deal, not a bond. And bonds built on conditions don't last. They break under pressure. They collapse the moment the transaction fails. But bonds built on love is a natural, unconditional flow. Those are the ones that endure, that evolve, that grow stronger with time and understanding. Not because they're perfect, but because they're honest. Because they're built from a place of giving, not from a place of need. Because they honor love not as a commodity, but as a sacred act of spiritual generosity.